Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show brought to you by the FTN Network. Of course, I'm your host, Walter Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur. We're out here doing our thing, grinding through collegiate sports. What could be better? We had some mid-major action tonight. That was sure fun. Going into it, we have a 7-game slate tomorrow. Finals week just about over. It's about 2 days left to get this finals garbage out of here. And we'll have some really, really large slates here going forward. Can't wait. We're in the midst of bowl season as well. There is a bowl game tomorrow. The Super Show schedule for this week, a bit different. We have tonight, which we're going to be covering CBB. And then Wednesday night will be the CFB version of the show. Myself and Jake Kuchek will be covering 3+ games on Friday, 3+ games on Saturday. So we'll have all the action that you need there from a DFS and betting perspective. And then Friday night, back at it with the collegiate basketball version of the show. Means no show tomorrow on Tuesday like normal. That will be the schedule going forward after bowl season ends, Monday, Tuesday, Friday. So a little bit of a changes there. And of course, next week for the Christmas schedule, there will be some slight changes as well, but I'll have that schedule for you on Friday. If you are new to the show, what we do here, we break down the college basketball DFS slate from a DraftKings perspective in a game-by-game, tried-and-true format, giving you any core plays that we like, anybody that we think might just not be very good at all. Talk about some efficiency stuff, any DVP spots that there might be, any sneaks, all of that good stuff. At the end, we'll provide you with a 3-man core that you can ride with in all formats. Also talk a little bit about the projection stuff that we're working on, any underdog/prize pick stuff, and then any betting opportunities as well. Please show your support by the show, new or veteran viewer of the show, by hitting the like button here on YouTube. If you're watching on Twitter/X, liking, reposting, retweeting, all of that good stuff. Interactions are key. They help us a great deal, not just on the Super Show, but the FTN network in general. So please, if you show your appreciation, the best way to do that is by interacting with us here on the show. Look at that. There's even some comments going through here. Alex, my man from Kakalaki, all those schools. I'll say what we're all thinking. Alex Condon could get Hubert Davis fired tomorrow. To the moon. Absolutely. DVP spot. Big men versus North Carolina. We'll get into that at length, but North Carolina, there's no Armando Bacot walking in that door. It's made life extremely difficult for RJ Davis. We saw Seth Trimble, a little bit of a non-con hero early on, but as defenses figure out how to take out the perimeter, which isn't that hard to do when you don't have a capable big man, life has been much more difficult. And I know as a Wolfpack fan, Alex is loving that. All right, let's get into this. Let's drop it in. We had a nice night tonight. Some really fun games. Grand Canyon, Louisiana Tech. Grand Canyon, man, the darlings of the mid-major level there out of the WAC. They are off to a rough start. Tyon Grant Foster's having a rough go of it. That Louisiana Tech team, I've been talking about them for a season and a half now with Daniel Bacho and company. They did a really nice job in the transfer portal. That's a team I'm very, very excited about. Brizovic from Charleston, he's a monster. TCU's injured. Federico, our number one play tonight. It was overall just a really great night. We're going to continue that on. And, there's only on 2 days left. The 18th, which is going to be the Wednesday slate, is that big 2-2-2, which is going to have a huge cash prize up top. So hopefully you guys have been getting tickets for that. That's going to be a very, very big talking point there as we get into the Wednesday slate. All right, let's start things off here with JMU, James Madison, the Dukes versus Wake Forest. This is a pretty nice little game here. It's a game that the Dukes definitely have a chance to win. Wake Forest has kind of struggled early on, and they haven't looked that great to me, despite having such a nice roster. And then coached by Forbes, who we do like. He's done a great job of developing players, but they just can't get over the hump to the tournament. And right now, I don't think they're a tournament team by any means. They are 8-point favorites against the Dukes. This is not last year's James Madison team. They're not as good, but they've got some guys. Total of 136. Starting with James Madison, you're probably not too familiar with them. They have been on a slate once or twice this season already. But again, this is a far cry from last year's team that beat Michigan State. The starting lineup that we'll typically see from the Dukes: Mark Freeman, Xavier Brown, A.J. Smith, Eddie Ricks, and Elijah Hutchins Everett, the Seton Hall transfer. Primary options off the bench. This name will be near and dear to your heart, Alex. Ebenezer Duana, Luke Anderson, Justin Taylor, and Bryce Lindsey. Duana, Taylor, and Anderson are all kind of like third or fourth options even off the bench. Bryce Lindsey, who is the freshman that transferred in, technically a second-year freshman, transferred in from Texas A&M last year. He doesn't start, but the primary option off the bench has an extremely high usage rate and shot rate, over 26%. He is the one that they look to a lot to generate offense. I do like him quite a bit. He is priced at just 6.2K. Nobody on this particular James Madison team priced above 7K. Lindsey, despite not being a starter, has to be considered one of the best players on this team. And because he doesn't start, I think that should keep his ownership down for the most part. If you go through and look at, he's absolutely chucking. He is going to need those shots to fall. Doesn't get a lot in terms of peripherals, but he could score 20 real points here and basically coast into value. So we like Bryce Lindsey, number one. At 6.7K, you have Xavier Brown. He does a little bit more throughout as a more traditional, peripherals guy. Does have one of the highest assist rates on the team at 24%, shoots about 37% from long range, and has a shot rate of 25.2%. A more complete player, maybe not the same level of scorer that Lindsey is, but definitely a type of 10 to 12 point, 4 to 5 rebounds, 6 to 7 assist type guy. Gotta like him as well in this one. As far as anyone else on the James Madison side, don't particularly love Hutchins Everett at the 6K price point. He gets pretty much 19 to 24 minutes depending on his foul situation. He does have some pretty solid fantasy point per minute numbers, but he is definitely a little high price for my blood there. Has put up 29 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 4. I just feel like there's a little bit of downside. Wake Forest has Efton Reed. It'll be a race to see who gets into foul trouble between Reed and Hutchins Everett. And honestly, going up against a P4 now, not P5, front court definitely has me more concerned. James Madison hasn't played that many good teams here yet, so we haven't really got a chance to see them truly tested. And I think Hutchins Everett may be a little bit risky there. Eddie Ricks at 4.7, the main benefactor. We could see him get pretty good minutes, 25 plus perhaps there, especially if Hutchins Everett does end up getting into some early foul trouble. Ricks typically plays about 22 to 25 minutes. He just got in the starting lineup at the end of November after coming off of the bench. This is a player who we're going to rely on for peripheral stats at 4.7. I think he provides some value. This is a slate that looks a little bit more lower scoring. The early run of projections, there's not a ton of guys over 4X. So you can get away with some of these 3X type options. Rick's logs aren't going to look particularly great, but I do think this is a spot where he can do pretty well. And then we have Mark Freeman there at 5.4. Healthy now. It kind of expected him to be a bigger factor throughout this season. He did have some pretty big games towards the end of November, but overall, he's just been a steady 3.5, 4X performer at current price of 5.4. Don't mind him either, but he's clearly behind Lindsey and Brown, who I think I would be looking to possibly prioritize one of them. And at this moment, it's Lindsey at 6.2. I do think he'll be pretty low owned. On the Wake Forest side, we're seeing a bit of trickeration going on here, so you need to tread very carefully with this Wake Forest team. The starting lineup has been for the last few games here: Cam Hildreth, Efton Reed, Hunter Salas, Trevon Spillers, as we would expect, and then Davin Cosby. However, Davin Cosby as a starter, you just can't trust. 2 games ago against Minnesota as a starter, played 7 minutes only. This was coming off of a game where he had 33 minutes against Detroit Mercy, 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. A few of us jumped on him the very next game against Florida. He played 13 minutes as a starter. Then he played 33 minutes as a starter against Texas A&M, 11, 5, and 2 with 3 steals and a block. A massive game. You'd think, wow, maybe we can go to him. This wasn't on the slate against Boston College the very next, it was a couple nights after. But again, as a starter, he played 4 minutes. So when you go through his total logs since he began, he came off the bench the first 4 games. Then he started his first game of the season against Xavier. Here's what those minutes logs look like. 21, 22, 33, steady. Suddenly, 13, 7, 33, 4. Not steady at all. I do not have the, as much as I tell my wife, who fancies herself into the, astrology and some Wiccan type stuff. I'm pretty superstitious, so I've got various things. When it's a full moon, we do the whole putting the things out in the moonlight. We're all about it. And I try to tell her, to use these powers for good as a Gray Sports Almanac, which I've explained to her in depth very often what that means, but we haven't got there yet. And until she can tell me exactly how many minutes Davin Cosby's going to get as a starter, I don't think we can ever use him. If you're doing the MME thing, which I have started doing over the last 2 days now, we have looked at running the 20 max and the $1, putting the projections to the test. They've been pretty solid. Davin Cosby would definitely be one of those multi-enter type of plays there. You could be rewarded handsomely if he does play 30-plus minutes because he's going to put up a nice number, but you just can't guarantee anything there. If he gets off to a slow start, Forbes just keeps the leash very, very short. The benefactor when Cosby doesn't play much has been Juke Harris, who is a very intriguing freshman prospect that probably deserves 25-plus minutes going forward, but with Coach Forbes, we just don't know if that's going to happen. 31 minutes against Boston College, hit 3 threes, 12 points, 2 rebounds and assists, 17 fantasy points. He's been getting fairly solid minutes, 15 to 20 minutes as the season has gone on, and when he's out there, he has pretty sizable metrics that make him an intriguing play. But at 4.6K coming off the bench, again, another option here. We just can't guarantee if it's going to be 15 minutes or if it's going to be 30. So that's another one of those MME type of plays. If you're right, you're going to get paid off huge because he's not typically a guy that most people are going to look to roster. Maybe he slides into the starting lineup. That would certainly be nice, but I highly doubt that is actually what happens. Does have a solid 18.4% shot rate, a block rate over 2.5%, 33% three-point shooter. He's getting volume on 27 attempts. You see the upside there. I think next year we're going to be talking about a guy, if he doesn't transfer, who is a very, capable and regular play for us. But Cosby and Harris, those are the two that are highly up in the air. You also have Tyler Johnson, who did see his minutes start to come up. After missing a few, 16, 18, 14, and 24. Then against Texas A&M, he played 2. So he's a victim of that as well. And then he played 19 against Boston College. So all those secondary Wake Forest plays, you just don't know how many minutes they're going to get. And then the 4 that are going to get huge minutes, Cam Hildreth, who we have 2 years ago, we loved. His PRA props were endlessly profitable, right? Has been just okay since. Hunter Salas, who we were a big believer in him coming into the season, but you can only hurt us so much, Hunter, before we have to walk out that door, which we have. Efton Reed, who has really not looked very good this year whatsoever. 6'1" for him is a very good price, but the inconsistent nature of his play makes him very hard to play. And then Trevon Spillers at 8.1K, who has shown major upside. He put up a 45 against Minnesota, which was 18 and 16, completely took over that game and ensured that they won. For the most part, he probably has the safest floor, but we are overpaying slightly at the 8.1 point price point. However, going up against some of these mid-major or low-major teams, we like to defer to front court players. They have an advantage. In JMU, they have some size in the front court, and they've been a very good defensive rebounding team, but still looking at it, I think that, once Elijah Hutchins Everett, who is almost 7 foot, gets into foul trouble, Ebenezer Dewana has almost no offensive game. He hasn't for, 4 years now. He's a bit of a shot blocker, gets into foul trouble all the time. Once those two inevitably get into foul trouble, they're not going to have anyone above 6'6" left. I think we could see those front court players like Spillers, like Efton Reed, actually have fairly decent games. Just depends on what kind of ref comes out there in this Wake Forest game. Also, JMU has Noah Williams by way of Washington State and Washington after taking last year off. He's not playing very many minutes, not really that viable of a play. All right, let's move on to the next game here. Nobody in that game projects well, by the way. I think that's one that we're going to have to just use our brains, unfortunately. No. But I do like some of the options here, like a Bryce Lindsey, like have him at 3.7, Xavier Brown at 3.8x. Those are all going to be pretty decent numbers considering how few players actually project over a 4x value here. But there's really only 2 games on this slate where guys project extremely well. One of them being the game we're going to talk about next here, Florida versus North Carolina. It is a 4-point spread in favor of the Gators, total of 166.5. That one's going to go over. You can safely take that one to 170. Yes, I'm declaring this a very high-scoring game. North Carolina has been extremely susceptible, as we talked about in the early part of the show here, to the front court players, and Florida has a multitude of them. Nice tempo boost here. North Carolina's 5th in tempo. They are going to be pushing the pace. They have to. They just don't have the bodies in the front court to deal with some of these, elite centers that they face, and they've had to continue to try to push the pace. They face Auburn in the neutral court there in Hawaii. Janai Broome, our guy, 19 rebounds, 23 points. He's been a god this year anyways. We know that. Absolutely phenomenal game. They faced off against Michigan State. Now, Michigan State plays like 3 or 4 different big men, so it's kind of hard to peg. But Cohen Carr, who is a freak, kind of an undersized 4, sometimes plays the 5, but athletic as hell. He had 14 and 7. Jackson Keeler had 5 rebounds. Xavier Booker had 12 and 7. Like, just time and time again, North Carolina has gotten absolutely throttled by the opposing big men every time. Grant Nelson is not really a big man. He had 9 rebounds against them. You might remember last year in March, he had a massive career game against North Carolina. This is the spot you want to target. Bey and Dongo, who has had a really rough season for Georgia Tech so far, they did face each other last Saturday. Well, I should say 2 Saturdays ago, I guess, at this point. Had 19 points, 12 rebounds. And Dongo's season has not gone according to plan. The game against Northwestern only managed 19 minutes, 4 points, 5 rebounds. Epic struggle. Against Oklahoma, 4 points, 4 rebounds. Against Georgia, he did have 14 points, but just 4 rebounds. And we're talking about a guy who was putting up 40s last year with regularity, 19 and 12 against North Carolina. Struggled against all the other P4 teams he faced, 5 and 6 against Cincinnati. Struggle. North Carolina has a big game. So now we know DVP-wise, North Carolina, not great in the front court. They're facing off against Florida here. Florida has the longest active winning streak currently at 10 games, starting the season 10-0. Used to belong to UConn, but, this season has been a little bit weird for them. This game between North Carolina and Florida is taking place in the Spectrum Center, which is, where's that? Charlotte, right? So this is a bit of a, more of a home game for North Carolina. I think the Gators fans do travel well at this point, though, so we'll see. I'm not worried. Florida has the 96th fastest tempo in the country, so both teams fast, but Florida getting the bump there. 7th in offensive efficiency, 22nd in defensive efficiency, a top 10 offensive rebounding team as well. Defensively, these guys can get after it. They have just been mowing team after team after team. A lot of neutral games for them. Arizona State, Wichita State, Wake Forest, bunch of neutral court games. The front court here, it starts with Alex Condon. We've been pushing Condon. Even as a freshman, he had to share time. Gets into foul trouble, we know that, but this is just such a great spot for him to do well. 13.8% offensive rebounding rate, top 75. Combined rebounding rate just a tick under 30%. He is shooting 46% from long range as well, so he's versatile. 13 attempts, but still, he's out there hitting shots if you leave him. Top 75 offensive rating, block rate of 5.5%, and he's drawing 6.5 fouls per 40. The good news is his fouls called rate is 3.1 so far through the first 10 games of the season. Last year as a freshman, it was over 5.5. Keep that down, around 3. We can handle 3. We can't handle 5.5. I don't even know how you could handle 5.5. So we love Alex Condon. Now, he's not cheap like he was all the time last year. You're going to have to pay a premium, which is $7.2K. His logs aren't like super sexy. He has put up 32 plus in 2 of the last 3, but when you go through, you'll see a lot of sub 30s. And hopefully that'll kind of push people away. Maybe they'll think, I don't really want to pay that price for him. Can I get away with paying somebody else? I got to pay for Eric Dixon, who's unfadable. Duke, we got Cooper Flagg. I just don't know that Condon's going to see that ownership like he should. So that's going to be a little bit of a sneaky play. Now, we do need to leave the salary at our disposal for Walter Clayton, who's priced at 8.6. 2 games ago against Virginia, I had Walter Clayton plugged in. I said this last or the slate as well. Made no sense to fade him against Virginia. Yeah, it's Virginia. They're slow, whatever. But this is not Virginia of 3 years ago, even last year. This is a real bad Virginia team. Ended up fading Clayton. He goes off for 42, 27, 3 and 4. Felt real bad. Was never fading him against ASU. He got moderate ownership there. Puts up another 40-plus game. We can count on him to put up another 35-plus with ease here against North Carolina. Going to be relying on his scoring. Do not be scared. If you do roster Clayton along with me, I'm definitely playing him. The first half may be a bit of a struggle. He does have a tendency to slow start. I know it's kind of a pain in the ass. It's scary, but he takes over the second half of just about every single game. So don't be alarmed. I mean, if he's at 8 at halftime, maybe be alarmed. But if he's at about 15, you don't have to be too scared because he's going to be putting up a big number, especially if North Carolina can at least keep this somewhat close. Smaller spread here, but if North Carolina is not making their threes, they're going to get buried by 10, 15, 20 plus points. Honestly, this could get ugly real fast if they're not making their threes. Threes have to be made. So gotta love Walter Clayton here, who scored 19 real points in 4 straight games. The price is 8.6. I think he's going to be over at 9K after this game, and I don't think he'll go back under 9K. Might be one of the last times we can really justify rostering Walter Clayton. Love him in this one. 2 Florida plays against North Carolina all day long. It's not a huge slate, 7-gamer, big enough. We're going to be rostering Clayton and probably Alex Condon. You can also look at Elijah Martin. He's there at 8.3. He also put up 40-plus against ASU. A little bit tougher to get to him. He's more of the GBP alt look, 300 cheaper than Clayton. Would have worked real well to play them both last time against ASU, or you could have just run the Florida stack, really. You have Will Richard at 6.5. It's a good price for him. He does project well. He always seems to. Now, Richard's the inverse of Walter Clayton in that he'll start off really hot. So many times this year in the first 15 minutes of games, he'll be knocking on the door of 20 fantasy points and be like, Jesus, why didn't I roster this guy? And in the second half, he'll go completely ghost, and he'll finish with 22, 24, 25. Now, against ASU, he had a really good game. Wichita State game, he had 20 at half. He ended with 25. It happens all the time with him, so tread carefully there. But he's really a pretty good price at 6.5. Solid rates across the board. Peripherals are strong. He can hit threes. He does a little bit of everything. So I don't mind him. If you want to take the extreme discount there from Walter Clayton to him, it's definitely an agreeable option. As far as the rest of the plays on Florida, it's basically going to be playing GPP guys here. None of these are main team viable. Ruben Chinyello, he's going to be at the mercy of fouls, right? He'll see 22 max minutes. Thomas Howe, who I love, at 5.5 is a great GBP play. He's kind of stuck in that 15 and 20 minute mark too. He had some big games early on in the non-con, but we've seen him kind of fade off. He needs Condon foul trouble to produce. So in a GBP lineup that you fade Alex Condon, you can go to Thomas and hope that plays out that way. Sam Alexis is there at 4.9. Also right in that 15 to 20 minute range. He's okay there, probably not quite usable. And then you have the likes of Denzel Aberdeen at 4.4, who is a good value at that price. He's going to get 20 minutes as a secondary guard. Don't hate it, but probably not getting there just because I don't want 3 Florida guys necessarily. So that leaves us with Clayton and Condon as our main guys. Martin, Richard, Hoff, those type of plays as GBP. High scoring game. We don't want to completely ignore the Tar Heels by any means. RJ Davis is a good price at 9.4. He doesn't project well, and he hasn't at all this year. It's kind of one of those ones where you just have to plug him into a good matchup and kind of ride it out and hope for the best. He hasn't been shooting particularly well. 7 of 24 against Bama. That was a rough one. 1 for 11 from 3-point range. That one kind of got away from them, right? 94-79 win for Bama. If those threes aren't falling, I just don't know that they're going to have enough to keep up. 4 for 11 against LaSalle. That game got out of hand really early and quickly. LaSalle just didn't have it. Foul trouble for Corey McKeithen on the LaSalle side kind of ended their day. 5 of 15 against Georgia Tech. 6 of 18 against Michigan State. He's having some pretty porous shooting days. And if you watch North Carolina games, and I hope you've seen at least a couple, I mean, you really should watch the games. Mike Kutcher used to say, and I agree, and I used to say it too, watch the games. North Carolina has a real hard time because RJ Davis is seeing an extra defender. When Trimble and Elliott Kadu were doing well offensively early on, defenses couldn't cheat over as much, but Trimble's now, he was playing over his head early, let's admit, kind of regressed back to the mean. It's making life difficult on RJ Davis. He's taken a lot of contested shots, and as good as he is, it's just really leading to some pretty horrific numbers overall shooting-wise. He can still volume his way to 30-35, but at 9-4, we're just not getting that upside from him. Elliott Kadu at 7-4 is a little bit expensive for me as well. Same thing. He was putting up some monster numbers early on. And I mean, they had the Kansas game. He had a pretty nice outing there. Hawaii, he looked good against, but just like he has kind of just been pretty mediocre. And again, he's shooting horribly too. 4 for 13 against Tech, 0 for 4 against Bama. He was in crazy foul trouble early. He is turning the ball over at an alarming rate, not taking care of it whatsoever. 7 turnovers against Georgia Tech. Like, you just can't use him anywhere, especially not on FanDuel. Seth Trimble, we used him for the first 5 slates of the season due to being underpriced. Now that he's 7K, it's pretty much where he should be. Now, he had a pretty nice game against LaSalle, 10, 8, and 4 for 28 fantasy points. So he is usable. He gets himself to the foul line a lot, and he does rebound quite well. The bigs that North Carolina does have, they're just so awful that Trimble has to hit the glass. So I don't mind him if you do want a North Carolina run back for this mini Florida stack. It's not necessary, but that's the most likely player that you can use. And then the freshman, Drake Powell, they're at 4-2. Ian Jackson at 5'9". Jackson has had some pretty nice outings, which is why his price has jumped way up there to 5'9". Can't use him there, but a prospect to definitely keep an eye on. Drake Powell kind of relegated to his three-point shooting. Did have some nice rebounding numbers against LaSalle at 4-2. He's a usable option. They need him to give them some big minutes where possible. This would be the game for it. And then you have the Jalen Withers, Jalen Washington, Ty Cloud, and Van Allen Lubin group. None of them play enough minutes to really matter. They're all sharing it. It's basically a hot hand situation or foul trouble. Now, we know Van Allen Lubin is technically the most talented of the group. We saw it during his time with Notre Dame. Various games where he'd pop up 30-plus fantasy points. And we have seen some pretty nice outings here for Carolina. He should be the one to play 20-plus minutes in this matchup. Like, they're going to need him. No faith that he can stay on the court. No faith in Hubert Davis either with these rotations. He is getting exposed badly for his X's and O's or lack of X's and O's without Armando Bacot. Coming into it, they should have probably brought in another big besides Van Allen Lubin. They wanted to trust their guy in Jalen Washington, who showed flashes and held his own. Whenever Bacot had to miss a game due to injury, Washington had some pretty nice games. But that was on limited basis. Other teams didn't have the game film to watch. Now they do, and we're seeing a lot of regression for Jalen Washington. He's not meeting any of that upside. So no usable values there. And you might say, well, what about Cade Tyson? He put up a huge number against LaSalle. He knocked down 5 threes. He also got 2 steals, a block. He put up 38. This is the Cade Tyson of Belmont. This is the guy. This is the Dalton Connect, right? This is it. He's opened up. We can play him. We have to play him, right? I am not going to be playing Cade Tyson. I would probably recommend that you don't either. If he was 3.1K, maybe, but do you really expect that to be a case where he, against the Florida defense, knocks down 5 threes? He's certainly not going to get 5 rebounds. They got out in front of LaSalle early, and it just allowed Tyson to play. And LaSalle being more of a team to Tyson's level, I don't think Tyson is ready for the Florida defense. So it'll be interesting to see if people roster him and chase that. It's a really obvious not use spot whatsoever. So I'll kind of defer that one. I haven't projected for 7 minutes. If you tell me he's going to play 20 minutes, I guess maybe we can look there. But Florida stacks all day long. Next game on the slate here, George Mason versus Duke. Duke has had a string of games of teams that have been completely overmatched by them. It's led to reduced minutes. Obviously, the Auburn game in between there was different, but Seattle, Incarnate Word, and even the Louisville game, it looked closer than it really was. We just haven't gotten full minutes from really any of the Duke guys, and it's made it difficult to pay some of the prices. But because of those reduction in minutes, especially last game against Incarnate Word, where Cooper only played 22 minutes, it's caused his price to drop back down to 9K. You may remember I said anytime he's at 9K or less, we simply have to play him. We can't really think about it. Going up against George Mason, this is a game in which they shouldn't have, too hard of a time. George Mason has some guys, but I've looked through the matchup. I don't think that there is going to be much for them to do against this Duke athleticism. It is a 19-point spread, total of 137. So the only real concern is, does Duke blow them out? If they do, how fast and what kind of minutes total are we going to be looking at? Competitive game against Auburn, Flag got 38 minutes. Non-competitive game against Incarnate Word, 22. I think we can safely put him at around 29 to 30 here, which is more than enough to pay off that 9K price point. Guard forward eligibility, we always love that flexibility. So as far as the pay-ups go, Eric Dixon has been damn near unfadable, but 10K against Seton Hall, slow game. Colin Murray Boyles, maybe. Ian Schifflin hasn't been really fadeable yet. You have RJ Davis, Bryce Sturtz, who we'll talk about on Drake. Like, Cooper Flag's just the obvious pay-up option there, at least for me. There's a lot of safety there. And in single entry stuff, I am prioritizing him. Maybe more into large field MME stuff. He's kind of, less of a priority there. But when it comes to high dollar single entry stuff, I think it would be a mistake not to just plug Flag in, take his floor of 30 and move on. As far as the rest of the options go, we've seen Zion James starting games. It's caused his price to balloon up to 6K. Have to pump the brakes there. He has been a very good, just about borderline auto play for the last 3 or 4 slates. It hasn't always worked out, but he's put up 18 plus in 4 straight. Now that he's 6K, we need to see more. Can't quite roster him there. Con Knipple, early in the season, he was our dude. We loved him. He came through that first slate against Maine, right? Guard forward eligibility. Has hit a little bit of a freshman wall early on with his shooting. His assist numbers have remained high. His rebounding has kind of betrayed him. He hasn't been putting up big numbers, under 23 fantasy points in 4 straight. He is technically playable, that 6'3" price point. But I'm a little bit concerned with his deferring he's doing. Early on, he was taking every shot, which we love. Now he's deferring more, which I don't really love. Tyrese Proctor is a nice price at 5.9K. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. This is one of those games where I think he does get going. I think he actually racks up a decent amount of stocks as well. Not so much on the assist or rebound side, but steals and blocks I do expect to see from him. Caleb Foster's minutes have been reduced because of Zion James, so he's pretty capped at 18 to 20. So 5.2 might look like a decent price for him, but we're not there at all. Malik Brown is dealing with a toe issue, which caused him to miss their game against Incarnate Word. They didn't need him there. They probably don't need him for George Mason, so we'll see. The last few competitive games, he's been playing 25-plus minutes. So even if he does play here, I'm expecting hit 15 or less minutes. So can't use him, but he does have appealing logs, which I get. And then you have the other supreme freshman who's probably going to get drafted high, even though he's not being used all that much. Kaman Malawak, priced at 5.1. I want to pull the trigger there. He had a really nice game against Incarnate Word, scored 17 points, really took over on the inside. But, man, he is just really struggling. I think it's a tough roster because his offensive game is still a little bit limited. They're still figuring out how to use him with all these options around him, and there's a pecking order that they're trying to establish, right? And I think he's just kind of getting the short end of the stick, as if he doesn't have a big rebounding game, if he doesn't add stocks, he's just not getting there even at the 5.1 price point. Early on in the season, he was, more like 6K, more like damn near 7K at one point. But I think it's going to be really hard to roster him, even though I do like this matchup. His minutes have been way too sporadic. Do like him for MME stuff, though. He is a really good-looking large field play. And when you look at it, his usage and overall shot rate is low, but he has one of the highest offensive ratings in the country because he gets a lot of high percentage shots. He has a top 75 offensive rebounding rate, combined rebounding rate of 28%, and a block rate of nearly 6%. So he does a lot of things well, but we just don't see him on the court long enough. And a lot of the times we get these 3-minute stints from him, and that's just not enough time to do anything. I hate when coaches use guys like that because, they're out there, maybe they get a rebound, just about to get into a rhythm, pulled out. get out there. Maybe they get an assist. Maybe they hit a shot, pulled out. Like they need more than 5 minutes stints to really kind of pan out. If they get fouls or they're a defensive liability, then sure, I get it. But man, it's just an annoying way to coach. Don't they know we're playing DFS and making bets here? How dare they? How dare they not make that a consideration? And then, you have Mason Gillis there. You have Isaiah Evans. I was curious if people were going to chase Evans after he had that ridiculous game against Auburn. It didn't happen, so people were a little bit sharper than I gave them credit for. Did play 18 minutes against Incarnate Word at 4K. If he was a 3K play, you could take a shot there, but I don't think we can really get to him at this stage. This is, I believe, the first time, am I right, that George Mason's been on the slate? Okay, second time. They played Marquette early in the season. Almost forgot. So this is the second time we've had the Patriots on the slate. This is going to be a real tough test for them. Ken Palm has it 76-59. I just think that they're going to have a difficult time getting rebounds, scoring, staying out of foul trouble. The starting five we can count on here: Darius Maddox, Braden O'Connor, Zach Anderson, Jalen Haynes, and Woody Newton. Off the bench, you're typically going to get Jared Billups, Giovanni Imajuru, and Katie Johnson. Now, Katie Johnson was a DNP last time out. That happens sometimes for him. He did start the game against UNC Asheville 2 games ago, played 26 minutes. You know the deal on Katie Johnson. For years, the 1 year at Georgia, he was off the bench, freshman, high usage rate. We loved him. Then he spent a couple of years at Auburn, hit or miss sometimes, but we know he's a high usage guard. Has a 24.1% usage rate. If he were to start, I would probably have some interest because he's only 4.2K. And if there's a player on this George Mason team that won't be afraid in the moment on Duke's floor, it's Katie Johnson. He's pretty fearless, but he's probably going to get a ton of turnovers. We'll see. I don't think he's hurt long term. Let's see. I doubt we're going to get any news here, but let's see. Yeah, I didn't think we would, and we didn't. So we'll see how that shakes out if he actually has a starter. I highly doubt it, so it's going to make it very difficult. I'll do some message board reconnaissance in the morning like I do to see what happens there and if he's actually playable. As for anyone else, Darius Maddox is too expensive for me at 7.7. He's a fine floor play, 22 to 25 fantasy points. In the past, we've been able to take mid-major, studs against Duke, but this team, this variation of Duke, they've done a really nice job. Probably leaves the most playable look as Braden O'Connor sitting there at 6'2". He's been the most consistent combination of floor to ceiling of anybody on this Patriots team, and the one that I would expect to be on the floor the most besides Maddox. Regardless of how this shakes out and if they get blown out. 20.6% usage rate, 21.6% shot rate, 19.5% assist rate. Does draw about 3.5 fouls per 40. Only 30% from long range, but he's taken 23. And he's definitely been more of a offensive focal point over the last few games. Now, the highest usage rate on the team besides Katie Johnson is Jalen Haynes. Started his career with Virginia Tech a few years ago. Then he spent last year with East Tennessee State. Has a 29.2% usage rate, 26.1% shot rate. Looking at his price, he's there at 6'7". That's a little bit of a tough ask, but he did take 15 shots against Asheville, 11 against Tulane, and 13 against JMU. 3 straight games over 30 fantasy points. That'll be something that people probably notice. A double-double in his last 2. Can he do that against the Duke front court? He's drawing 6.5 fouls per 40, getting 4.4 fouls per 40, but you got to watch out for the Duke refs. They're looming. They've noticed what you've done, Jalen, and they're going to be out to get you. So tread carefully with Jalen Haynes, please. I beg of you. All right, next game on the slate here, Oakland versus Michigan State. Man, I'm getting so much shit with the haircut, man. This is my my cartoon avatar. This is more what I looked like on the avatar before I started growing out my hair. He says, has anyone told you it looked like John Jacobs with the buzz? I've been called Braden Smith by Mike earlier. I've been called, I'll admit, we're all friends here, right? In high school, we did the buzz cut thing. Before that, I did, I grew up in an era with a rapper named Eminem. Maybe you've heard of him. And I may or may not have done the bleach blonde thing. So I've had people say that, I look like a larger version of Eminem. Haven't been called John Jacobs yet, but let me pull it up. FAU coach. Let me pull up what he looks like these days. He's completely bald. Yeah, you're kind of right, man. You're kind of right. Here, let's pull it up. Let's pull it up for people. He's skinnier than I am, though. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. We're all friends here. I admit I did my hair bleach blonde back in the day. This was like 1999 though. So like everybody was doing it. You probably weren't even born yet, Brett. Where is it? There it is. All right. Let's bring this one up. I don't know. What do you guys think? Maybe if I do, he's thinner than I am, but yeah, he's got the big nose going on. It's a good call. It's a good call. I think you might be right. I do kind of look like that. Oh man. All right, let's get that out of here. Yeah, he's completely bald. I mean, I kind of look like my lighting's kind of I got to redo my whole like lighting in here in the off season, and then I'm gonna do my background different. I got a new desk ordered, so it's gonna be a lot different. So it does kind of look like I'm bald here, shiny off my head like I'm Charles Barkley or something. But I digress. Let's move on here to the Oakland versus Michigan State game. Very playable options on both sides. Oakland, the near and dear to our heart team from last year, a lot different now. No Trey Townsend. He's over at Arizona struggling, and who knows, where the legendary three-point shooting Jack Golke is these days. He might be in the NBA. I know he was in the summer league stuff for a while. But this Oakland team under Greg Kampe, they're eternal. They've started out pretty rough, 3-5, but they have a tough schedule. They've faced Illinois, Kansas, Boise State. Now they're going to have Michigan State. Granted, this is on a neutral. But once they get into Horizon League play, I have a pretty big faith in them that they're going to survive. The number one play on the slate, and this is, I believe, the second time we've had Oakland. Let's see. Yes, when they played Kansas, they were on the slate. So the number one overall play for Oakland, and possibly the number one play on the slate, at least in terms of expected ownership, is Alan Mukeba at 5.8K. Has been just absolutely crushing it for the Grizzlies. They're looking for a new number one. He's stepped up into that spot. 28.4% usage rate, 29.7% shot rate, a offensive rebounding rate just a tick under 8%, and a block rate of 6.6%. Clearly underpriced. Now, he spent the last couple of years at UMKC where he was a rebounding machine for the Kangaroos. He has fit in very well. Took him a couple of games to get going, but as a starter, he has really, really performed. Against Kansas, he had 19.7 rebounds, 2 steals, 35% usage rate there. Against Illinois, 8.6 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. He's done pretty well against the upper tier competition. Even against Boise, 3 blocks, 2 steals, 10 points. He has been really, really good. It was only 4.8K in that Kansas game, and really I don't recall anyone rostering him there because it was early in the season, but now you'll see against Wright State, 40.5 fantasy points, 33 against Toledo, and then 25 against Youngstown State. Michigan State's defense is good, but I'm not scared of it that much. I think he'll be very, very good here. Definitely at the forward slot. This has been the year of forwards. We can kind of attest to that. It was another night tonight where I think I had 4 forwards, and in the past we've struggled to even find one. We have Alan Mukeba there as a number one overall forward at 5.8 when you consider a X value return expectation. The first run of projections here has him right at the top, 4.9x, 28.5 fantasy points next to a bunch of guys from Drake because they never come out. Our guy Victor Locken, Alex Condon, and Will Richard. So that's at the top of the projections, Alan Mukeba. So number one, we want him. DQ Cole there at 6'1". He's going to pale in comparison because of how cheap Mukeba is. DQ Kill is a returner from last year's tournament team. Going to play 35 plus minutes. Definitely a GPP look. Guard forward eligibility for Jason Woodrich. He's overpriced at 7K though. I don't know why he's priced at 7K. He's had maybe 2 games over 25 fantasy points this year. Really confused there. That's the kind of play you hope people just like, they have salary left over. They're not really paying attention. They just assume that, oh, DK priced him at 7K. It must be okay. And then you see him get rostered. It's kind of what I'm hoping there. Woodrich was a role player the last few years for Cleveland State. More of a defensive presence, but he should not be 7K. He performs more like a 4K guy. So you can pretty much not pay attention to him whatsoever and be just fine. As far as anybody else here, you have Biru Nabarurora. Almost feel like that guy that fainted last night at that political thing. You guys see that? It's like slurring my words, and then he fell down. That was fucking scary. Buru is a solid forward option at 5.9K. Another look. I think everybody will be so focused on Mukeba, myself included, they won't notice that Buru has been doing just as well. Oakland's front court has been pretty solid. Their KenPom page is pretty red, pink, and salmon, which isn't great. They do play as one of the slowest teams in the country as well, but they've held their own, at least these two. Buru's offensive rebounding rate, 10.5%. Combined rebounding rate of 29%. He does have a shot rate of 23.3%, third highest on the team. He's not a three-point shooter by any means, but he gets it done everywhere else, draws about 3 fouls per 40. A nice little piece of leverage there. If you're doing the MME thing, going to him, he does have upside to at least 35, 36 fantasy points if it's a game in which Mukeba, is off at 70%. And, Buru puts up a 30 at 8%, you're going to be so far ahead of the rest of the field. On the Michigan State side, it gets dicey. They're pretty well healthy at this point. We love Trey Holloman. Been begging for him to get more minutes. Once there were injuries, he finally did. Kind of stuck, though, regardless, because of how healthy they are. He's going to get mid-20s minutes, and now he's priced at 5.6. It's a little bit harder to get to him. Same thing with Jeremy Fears at 5.5. Starts games, but he's stuck in this 22 to 23 minute range. It really severely caps his upside. If he were to play 30, he would be an absolute massive play already. He has a bright future. Really like him. They're starting to play Frankie Fiddler less. Fiddler was a very highly sought after transfer from Omaha. Has not adjusted very well at all to this level of play. Struggled against Nebraska, struggled against Minnesota, wasn't great against Memphis. He has just been really, really struggling. Priced at 5.4, which is the cheapest he's been all season long. But you see the reduction in minutes. He's gone from 27 to 15 to 16. Really can't count on him. Jackson Keeler does project well even at the 5.7 price. He's had 2 really good games. He tore up Minnesota, 11 points, 11 rebounds. Tore up Nebraska, 12 rebounds, 8 points. Doesn't take a lot of shots, but he has such strong peripherals. You can look at him at 5.7. I do want one of these Michigan State forwards, just a matter of picking the right one. Akins is also fairly cheap at 6.3, but same problem. If it's not a close game, his minutes won't be there. He's still really, as supposedly the alpha on the team this year with everybody else who left and graduated or headed to the NBA. He was supposed to be this 35 fantasy point per minute guy, 35 fantasy points per game guy, and that hasn't worked out. So even at 6.3, that's kind of just where he should be. If you don't feel comfortable going to Keeler, it leaves you with the Cone Car play at 4.2. He has a really high upside. If we can get him over 20 minutes in this one, I think he absolutely shatters that. He has a great fantasy point per minute number, and overall his rates are fantastic. He's the type of guy where you just have to throw it up around the rim, and he's going to go get it. He has insane levels of athleticism, and he seems like a 7-footer the way he plays. He's only 6'5". He's only a sophomore. A lot of growing and developing to do yet. Really enjoy watching Cone Car play. Really enjoy watching Xavier Booker play. Another sophomore. Again, minutes kind of capped for him. When we've seen Booker and or Carr go over the 20-minute mark, they've absolutely just shattered. The Carson Cooper play, they've started to give less minutes to. I know he had 17 against Nebraska, but that was because of some foul issues. But less Carson Cooper, more Booker, more Cohen Carr. That is a good thing. And it seems Tom Izzo has figured that out as well. And then you have the legacy freshman, Jason Richardson's son, Jace. He is back from an injury. Played just the 15 minutes against Nebraska, but he put up almost 20 fantasy points. He is very athletic, a great natural scorer as well, only priced at 5-1. There's a lot to like on this Michigan State side, and I feel like people are going to overlook it. Strangely enough, tonight on the 4-gamer, Texas Tech, we loved all of Texas Tech for the most part. Federico is 40-50%, but everyone else, like Chance McMillan, 11, Darian Williams, 12, like nobody rostered Texas Tech, and I feel like Michigan State's going to be in a similar situation where they're going to have several guys put up big numbers, but nobody's really going to be on them with the rest of the games on the slate. I think people are afraid of Sparty because they have a deep rotation. Texas Tech obviously has a short rotation, so a little bit different there, but I do think the Spartans are in a great position here. So Cohen Carr value, Xavier Booker, secondary value. Jace Richardson, I think, is fine. And then if you want some safety there, Holloman, Fears, and Keeler do provide that. And then you have the chalk Oakland play there in Mukeba, who I think everybody's going to have. And anybody that runs a projection system is going to have him probably rated very high, if it's any good. Clemson versus South Carolina. This is one to – I always get sidetracked, man. No worries. I would do it on my own if you didn't. Anyways, next game here, Clemson versus South Carolina. This is a battle for South Carolina state supremacy. Clemson, a 3-point favorite, total of 135. Pretty much nobody on the South Carolina slate or South Carolina team really that interesting except for our guy, CMB. But he's priced so high these days at 9.6. It's hard to get there. He will fight his way to 30-35. I don't know that he has the upside in this particular spot. We've seen him churn out those 32-35s against the likes of Virginia Tech, BC, Xavier. Clemson will provide more resistance than that. So definitely not rushing to roster him as a pay-up, but I want some exposure somewhere. As far as the rest, at guard, Jamari Thomas, Zach Davis, Jacoby Wright, they're all kind of the same. They're all priced within 300 of each other, and none of them have much upside. They were fine as last man in type of plays, but now they're really not even on my radar because you'll have those games where you roster Wright, and then Davis puts up 25. Thomas will put up 30. Like, it's just so hard to peg them on a game-to-game basis, and it's even gotten to the point where they've watered it down each other so much that they're all just putting up 18 to 20 fantasy points, and they're just too expensive. The youngster Morris Ugas has had some pretty nice games. He's okay as a 4K value. His minutes have solidified into the low to mid 20s. So if you're hard up for value, you can use him, but he's a low end option. He's more of what he can provide you at the top with the pay-ups you're going to get and less about what his actual point total is going to be. Clemson side decision will have to be made. Ian Schiffelin has been absolutely just pretty much unfadable with his rebounding numbers. 13 against Miami, 20 against Kentucky, which is just outrageous against their front court, 15 against Florida A&M, 13 against a good Penn State team. Like, where does it end with Ian Schiffelin? To pay almost, to pay over 9K for him, it seems ridiculous, but definitely have to consider it with the numbers that he's putting up. Combined rebounding rate of 40%, which is just absolutely outrageous. 3.5% block rate, 24% usage rate. I'm not starting my lineup with him, so I don't know if I'll actually get there. He's at a price now where it's okay if he puts up 40 and you fade. Like, you can make those up. When he puts up 40 at 7.7, it's much harder to make that up. So you have some leeway there if you want to fade him. If he doesn't get in any kind of foul trouble, which he typically does, and he's probably playing 38 minutes in this game, though, so keep that in mind. Victor Locken, who started the season pretty rough. He had a big game, like a 50 against Eastern Kentucky, but after that, pretty regular, mediocre games from him. We were expecting more. The Memphis game, he really woke up 23-11. That's the Locken that I expected to see from the beginning. 7.6, a little bit of a steep price. I think most people will try to go to Schiffelin, so Locken makes sense as a GPP look. He's another one that has to avoid foul trouble, has great overall rates, highest usage rate on the team at 26.5%, highest shot rate on the team at 26%, a combined rebounding rate of 30%, and a top 30 block rate in the country at 9.3%. And for good measure, not only is he a rim protector, but he's shooting 37% from long range on 22 attempts. So he's really starting to wake up and is very usable there at 7.6. You might not have realized that. At the guard spots there, Jaden Zachary, 5.7, Chase Hunter at 6.8. Those are playable prices for both of them. I do still like Dylan Hunter. I know a few weeks back I put you guys on Dylan Hunter as a value. He played 23 minutes. It was against Penn State, but only 7 fantasy points there. Didn't quite work out at 4.2. Now he's priced at 5, but the minutes have continued to be there. You see 21, 26, 18, and 31 against Memphis. So really solid number there. Plug that in before that dies. There we go. So he's definitely in play at 5K. Not a lot of upside there, but he's definitely going to give us a close to 3x floor for the most part at 5K. And the minutes have really solidified. I think those are going to continue. We're seeing the reduction in Chauncey Wiggins minutes to a degree as they go with a smaller lineup. And Hunter has really kind of solidified himself as the third guard in the rotation here. And we're seeing Jake Heidbreder, the former Air Force transfer, his minutes start to go up as well. He's not quite playable yet, although he has 3.5K, which is interesting. Keep an eye on if his minutes continue to go up. But I do like Hunter Dylan variety at 5K, and then one of Schiffelin or Victor Locke in there, depending on what your lineup allows. Next game on the slate, Villanova versus Seton Hall. This is one. Seton Hall games, they suck. There's no other way to say it, but they suck. They just suck the life out of themselves, us, and the team that they're playing. Total of 127. Woo! Villanova 8.5-point favorites. Now I've been taking Villanova or the teams against Villanova anytime they are on the slate. And they were like 29-point favorites against Fairleigh Dickinson. No shot that they're ever beating a team by 30. I would even be apt to take Seton Hall here, but they've been even worse. So I couldn't trust this game at all. I wouldn't bet either side. The only thing that is for sure going to happen is the under 127. KenPom does have it at 69.58 in favor of Nova. Doesn't think much of Seton Hall whatsoever. Starting with Seton Hall, Chauncey Jenkins is not 100%. He's dealing with the knee issue. He hasn't started the last 2 games. Played 10 minutes against Oklahoma State, and that was in the first half. His knee flared up at halftime. They didn't play him a single minute in the second. And then he did play 24 minutes against Rutgers in a hard-fought loss, 66-63. But he's just not playable right now. The price of 5.4 is nice. DK is being very guarded with his salary. He should be like 4 or 5 right now, but I'm actually glad he's not, because that would make us have to really consider using him, and I don't want to play him at all right now. Not until he starts again, or we can be sure that his knee issue is alleviated, and I don't think either of those things are going to be happening anytime soon. So we're not on him. In the meantime, because of that, Isaiah Coleman has become the best player on the team. We saw flashes of this last year. Makes him technically playable at 6'3", 32 against Oklahoma State, 32 against Rutgers. He's been over 20 fantasy points in 7 straight. I don't hate it. He's playing 35 minutes a game pretty much. Definitely usable. This would be the last man in territory at 6'3". I don't think we're starting there, but if you are, in this range, you need a last man in. You ask me, what I think about 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", Isaiah Coleman. Dylan Adewusu, always in play in these mid-5 range. He's not exciting. He needs to rack up stocks. There's a rule with Adewusu. You got to figure out if he's going to be chalk. If he is, you almost have to play him, because he has a history over the last 4 years of absolutely detonating as chalk. It's a very strange thing that happens, and when he's not, he does absolutely nothing. So I don't think he will be, but he's definitely in play here against a Villanova team that, not very good, right? I'm most interested in Garwi Dual. I was last slate, and I didn't really play him against Rutgers, but I could have if I wanted to. He was 4.9K, put up 21. 3 straight games over 20 fantasy points. He has taken full advantage of Jenkins being out, and now that he's healthy, the shoulder issue is what has been, he had been dealing with earlier in November. 27, 34, and 21 minutes over the last 3. Not a big shot taker, not a big offensive player, but he has been kind of transformed into a facilitator under Coach Holloway. Has 16 assists over the last 3 games and 9 rebounds during that time. Also has 5 steals and 2 blocks. So a lot of peripherals there. He is for me, the more playable of the Seton Hall options. I don't think many people will be on him. The 5.3 price probably would make most uncomfortable. It definitely makes me uncomfortable, but I do think he's playable here against this Villanova team. Rates are pitiful. Shot rate of 10.5%, usage rate of 16%, but he has a top 100 assist rate at 29% a block rate of 4%, a steal rate of 5%, which is top 35 in the country, and drawing almost 4 fouls per 40. So I'm comfortable because I think he can get like 4 or 5 real points and then get the rest of that 20 to 22 we need with his peripherals. So I am definitely on Duval. Again, not a priority play, but I think he will find his way pretty close to my lineup here. We'll see what the final iteration looks like. His minutes have come at the behest of Prince Aligby, who's pretty much dropped 15 minutes against Oklahoma State, only 14 against Rutgers. Transferred from BC with the expectation he was going to have a big role for this team. He put up 35 fantasy points against NJIT a couple of games ago, but with him not starting, you really can't utilize him whatsoever. Gus Yalden has a pretty high usage rate, but he plays 4 minutes a game, so it doesn't really do you any good. And then Scotty Middleton had some upside coming from Ohio State, has shown it in kind of short spurts here for Seton Hall. Priced at 4.8, would much rather go to Duval or some of the other options in his range. On the Villanova side, you got to decide on Eric Dixon. He's just been so good, but his price is now at a level at 10K where you have to make that decision. Like, he's going to give you 35. Like, you're locked into a no worse than 3.5x. It's nice to have those raw points on a slate where it looks like 220 is probably going to be good enough to do some damage in single entry, certainly probably 230 to win some large field stuff, or at least top 10 large field stuff. So the 35 comes in handy. He can get higher than that. We've seen him put up 50s. I mean, he had almost 50 against Maryland. Very good game there. I don't think he's been under 30 a single time this entire season. Yeah, quick cursory look, he has not. So you're paying for safety there at 10K, but how much upside are you really going to get? So you have to see what you actually have to sacrifice to roster him, but he has been pretty unfadable throughout the year. The last time I faded him, I think personally, was the what was it? Gosh, the last time they were on the slate, Maryland. Yeah, I think the Maryland game I did fade him because I was like, 9-4. He put up 49, so the joke was on me. I haven't faded him since Cincinnati and Fairleigh Dickinson. But I'm definitely going to be hard-pressed to justify using him against Seton Hall just because, yes, he rebounds, yes, he gets other stats, but he really needs to score like 20 real points, and opportunities might not be there as much here against this Seton Hall team. Jameer Brickus is too high at 7K. He had a monster game, 10 points, 10 assists, 4 rebounds against FDU, kind of played above his head. I would not chase that. 7K is too expensive. I have him in a dynasty roster. Trust me, that's too expensive. On Wooga Poplar at 6'6", he's much more playable than Brickus. He's been safer. If you feel you have to get a Villanova play and can't afford Dixon, I think Wooga is that option for you. Peripherals are there, and he's got a pretty sizable shot rate. Definitely the second option on the team behind Eric Dixon. Longino at 5'6", too expensive for me. Enoch Bokai had a really nice game against FDU. They will need him here against Seton Hall. I think another big rebounding game could be in store for him. 5'2", it's an okay price point. Again, kind of last man in territory. Don't mind it. And then too young yet, Tyler Perkins. He's still kind of learning. I don't even think he's going to stay here past this season. But he did play 26 minutes against Fairleigh Dickinson. 4 of his last 5, he has played above 24 minutes. 5'2", just an okay price for him. All right, moving on to the last game here, Drake versus Kansas State. Man, Kansas State, the rumors are everywhere on this K-State team. Okoro has left the program, wasn't a good fit there. Great player, but just, I don't know. Jerome Tang's having some issues here. They paid for Coleman Hawkins. He really hasn't been worth it. And then Doug McDaniel was rumored to be kicked off the team last week. Doesn't appear to be the case, but Kansas State Twitter was running wild with that. Rumors that he punched Coleman Hawkins. Now Coach Tang has come out and said that their relationship is fine, he and Doug. Could it be better? Yes. They're not the best of friends, but they're adequate. Not the most ringing endorsement. So I really don't want anything to do with this Kansas State team right now. Coleman Hawkins at 7'5", as much hype as he got coming into the year and how much money he cost to come to Kansas State. Like, he's always been just a kind of a high-level role player at Illinois. I didn't really get the hype on him. The price has been way too expensive most of the season. 7.5 is definitely a playable price, but I just am hard-pressed to roster a Coleman Hawkins in a main lineup anytime soon. David Ngasson, who has been chalk a lot, kind of hit or miss, but 7.1K feels high for him. As strange as it says, I'd rather play him than Hawkins for 400 less. He has scored 31 plus in back-to-back games. Granted, one of them was against Arkansas Pine Bluff, but he was very good against St. John's, put up 31 against them. So he's the one I would use. Doug McDaniel's cheap at 6'4". I don't know if he gets a rug pull, if he gets, what kind of leash will he have? Quick hook if he's turning the ball over a bunch, if he's taking bad shots like he did 3 for 14 against St. John's. Like, we know the upside for 50 is there at this price. We saw it against Pine Bluff, but man, I am having very, very hard time trusting him right now. And the K-State guards in general, it's kind of ugly. Max Jones, CJ Jones, Brendan Housen, none of those plays really call to me. Every time I write off Housen, though, he knocks down like a million threes. That's what he did against St. John's, put up a 36. Played basically the entire game. You can rely on him to play 35 plus minutes here at 6'4". I guess he's technically playable. I just hate relying on a guy that's going to have to make 5 or 6 threes to really put up that number, but he is taking volume. Here, let's pull this up. I know he's quite high there on the list. 44%, not quite as much as I was thinking. 44% on 76 attempts. So good, not great. Does have a top 100 offensive rating, but if his shot's off, it's going to get ugly there. So at 6'4", it might seem right, but it could get real ugly real fast. We're not seeing enough minutes out of Ugonna Onyenso yet. We should. I don't know why we aren't. But this K-State team, man, I'm just really not liking them. I could go without having K-State on a DFS slate for the rest of the year. Obviously, that's not going to happen because it's only December, but I hate this team at this point. And it's weird because 2 years ago, I loved this team. Even predicted them to a tournament run. But, man, what a difference 2 years has made. On the Drake side, we have some really obvious looks here in terms of, hey, these guys are never going to leave the floor. Drake did just play a game against a non-D1 against St. Ambrose. You can throw that game out. The minutes in that game are irrelevant. In games that matter, Bennett Sturtz never leaves the floor. You'll see there's only been 2 games this year where he didn't play every single minute. That was in the first game against Stephen F. Austin. He played 39.5 minutes, so 30 seconds he didn't play. And then only 22 minutes in their last game against the non-D1. That's why I said you could throw that out. He is priced at 8.8K. Throughout the November non-con tournaments that were taking place, he was pretty cheap, 7.3, 8.1. 8.8's an expensive price for him, but again, you're getting every single minute. He has played 99.6% of the available minutes for Drake. That is the number one overall most played percentage of minutes in the country. Nobody's playing more than Bennett Sturtz. 25.8% usage rate, 27.7% shot rate, top 30 assist rate at 35%, 3.5% steal rate, drawing 5.5 fouls per 40. One thing he can't do is shoot threes very well at 29%. Like Bennett Sturtz, but you're going to have problems because if you feel like you got to have Dixon, fine. If you feel like you got to have Ian Schifflin, fine. If you feel like you got to have Cooper Flagg, fine. Where does that leave Bryce Sturtz for you? You're probably not getting him. You're probably going to 2 of Flagg, Schifflin, and Dixon, right? So some tough decisions to be made there. Sturtz, to me, if he's going to be on the lower end of the pay-ups, it automatically makes me like him the most, just my natural contrarian instinct. But the fact that he's playing every single minute, it just gives him such a safe floor. At this point, I think he's a better play than RJ Davis, which is real tough to say, but sometimes the truth hurts. As far as the other players, it drops significantly in price. Mitch Miscari at 5.8K. He's also pretty much playing every single minute. The first 2 games of the season, he was under 35, but he's played 40 in every single game since, except for the non-D1 win. His upside is not nearly as high as Sturtz, but 5.8K playing 40 minutes. Yeah, I definitely am on board. It gets a little dicey after. Daniel Abreu at 5'6". He was mega chalky. He put up 32 against a bad Miami team, 18-10, and then followed that up with a foul game against Florida Atlantic. He was terrible. We were all on him. You guys remember it. He just couldn't stop fouling. He's generally going to give you, on a good day, 25 to 26 fantasy points. So he's okay at the 5'6" price point. He's playing about 35 to 36 minutes. Drake plays their starters into the ground. Those 3, especially Sturtz, Miscari, and Abreu, you can count on them playing the entire game unless fouls happen. After that, then it gets even more dicey. Cam Manyahu, he's a bit of a fouler. He does have a great fantasy point per minute number, though, and his rates overall are fantastic. Want it to be a game like Vanderbilt, where he played 31 minutes, not a game, like GSU, where he played 17. But you look through his logs, even in games where he played only 17 minutes, he's putting up 25. Put up 11 in 9 minutes, 23 in 21 minutes, 45 in that 31-minute game against Vanderbilt. He is really, really active. Has a very high usage rate at 25%, just under Bennett Sturtz, 26.5% shot rate, a combined rebounding rate, astonishing 45%, top 25 in both offensive and defensive rebounding rate, 6.5% block rate, 3.5% steal rate. He does get called for 6 fouls per 40, though, so that is the main thing that can take him off the floor. But if he can get closer to 30 in this game against K-State, he is absolutely a slam dunk play at 4.9. The problem is road whistle comes into play here. I am a bit worried about him playing a reduced amount of minutes. Now, this is on the KenPom page, a semi-away game because they're playing at the T-Mobile Center, which is in the Power and Light District. If you ever hung out in the Missouri area, loved KC. I have stories for days about when I used to do work in Kansas City in more ways than one. But this will be a fun game for sure. I just feel like he's going to be in trouble. I think Kansas State gets a favorable whistle, unfortunately. So Manyahu may get a decent amount of ownership because of his great rates. Projections-wise, let's see where we got him. It's real simple. If he's on the floor, he's going to produce. So I have tentatively put him at 20 minutes, which has him at 4.5x. So you can see he's well liked because of his rates. Now, if he fouls and plays, let's say 12 minutes, then the wheels fall off. He's barely at 3x. So let's put him at, let's say he has a great game, doesn't foul and plays 28 minutes. Then we're talking about a 6.3x. So minutes are a great thing for him. We just need him on the floor. Risk that at your own peril. But I think he is worth the risk on this particular slate. Much better play to me than Abreu, which means Abreu will put up 50 and this Manuel will put up 12. And then Bryce Sturtz decision there. As far as anyone else, Tavion Banks is there at 4.3. He has fantastic overall usage rates, some of the best ones on the team besides Bryce Sturtz. He has been pretty steady at 4.3, and I actually think he's playable. He only needs 20 minutes to pay off this price at 4.3K. So, you need a little bit of a sneakier late game value. He's definitely it. I could see K-State getting caught with their pants down a bit, maybe not taking this game as seriously. Whatever off-court drama is taking place there in the locker room and elsewhere, being distracted, and Drake just coming in and absolutely detonating. And I think Banks is the type that could take advantage of that as well. So certainly in consideration here for a Drake mini stack. If you can't pay up for Sturtz, that may mean that you need to play 2 other Drake guys to kind of make up for it. But I do like Banks' GPP value. Decision on Manyahu, at least as a cheaper option. It's less of a risk. And at 4.9, it is a decision point for many. At 3.9K, he would just be rostered by 80% of the field, which I hate. So there you have it. That's the slate. Quickly, cleanly. Core-wise, right now, you'd be looking at Alan Makuba, who we love. We mentioned that. Second core is going to be Walter Clayton. And you could probably mark down Walter Clayton as the posh play. We haven't had a posh play yet this week. We are 3-4 on posh plays. We're getting back to 500 here real soon. So Walter Clayton at 8.6, we'll call him the posh play. Because I don't think people are going to, they're rostering Flag, Schiffelin. Like, there's some tough decisions that are going to be made here, and we're going to get a ton of guys in that 8K range that just aren't getting rostered. So I'm here all day for 10% Walter Clayton. And then third core play for me at this stage, a little bit tougher, but we will go with Alex Condon. 2 Florida, 1 Oakland. Double Florida, Clayton and Condon. I'm all here for that. as far as the projections go, Tavion Banks, Mitch Muscari, Cam Manawahu, and Brian Bennett Sturts all project really, really well. So the Drake stack is absolutely on the table. Jackson Keeler, a bit of a sneakier play there. And then some of that sneaky value with Cone Carr and Xavier Booker. But this will be a very interesting slate. Guys like Eric Dixon, I mean, at his price, 3.6x, people are going to feel obligated to play him. Cooper Flagg, 3.5x, people will feel obligated to play him. Now, I said I couldn't fade him at 9K or below. We'll have to see how the lineups shake out here. Perhaps we can play Flagg with Clayton and Alex Condon and make it work. We may have to come off of Alex here, but I'd hate to fade him in the nut matchup against North Carolina. So that's a line in the sand play there for me. For what I think will be chalk, Ian Schiffelin, Cam, maybe Will Richard. And Mitch Muscari. I'm just trying to look where other people's systems will be. Those are the chalk pieces I think we'll be looking at. So if they want to gift wrap us Florida outside of Will Richard as non-chalk, let's fricking go. All right. Let's see if there's any prize picks up. They haven't been putting them up till the morning lately. That is the case on prize picks, as expected. Pretty soon we're going to have these big slates, by the way, that we're actually going to be able to hit some big prop betting stuff. St. John's just played DePaul. By the way, we were having lock a half an hour early, all week last week, and now we have a DePaul St. John's game taking place a half an hour earlier than lock, and they're not on the slate. Well done. Makes a lot of sense. So we've got props for that game on Underdog. Let's see. Gotta absolutely love until further notice Kaderi Richmond under 11.5 points. I know it's DePaul, but they're just too many mouths to feed. Under 11.5 points there for him. David Skogman had a huge game 2 games ago, and then he went back to being David Skogman last game. I like his under 5.5 rebounds in that one. So 2 under picks. Walter Clayton, let's see. Over 19.5 points, over 23.5 points plus assist. Alex Condon, over 12.5 points, and his PRA number sitting at 21.5. As long as he doesn't be a dodo, brain, and foul, he's gonna surpass that number very, very easily. So like the 2 overs there. Lock in over 17.5 points plus rebounds. That's too low. That's a great number there for him, even against South Carolina. Jamari Thomas under 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists. There's no way. UNLV taking on Dayton. Why couldn't that game be on the slate? UNLV has been betraying us a little bit in the prop market lately. Dayton is a team I've just not wanted to really do anything with. I don't know what happened to Posh Alexander, but I don't like it. Jeremiah Cherry for UNLV, over 12.5 points plus rebounds. I do like that number. Old Miss taking on Southern. Why couldn't that be on the slate? No, we don't like those props. Oakland game versus Michigan State. I do like the 14.5 points plus assist number for Trey Holloman. We will take the over there. They really want to dare us with that. Jameer Brickus has a 17.5 PRA number. Really want us to do that one, but I'm just going to skip that. Mississippi State takes on Central Michigan. Why couldn't we have that? Props there for Cam Matthews and Josh Hubbard. Do you like the Cam Matthews over 14.5 points plus rebounds? He's got to compete with other really good front court players on Mississippi State, but that's a really low number for both points and rebounds for him. Colorado State taking on Radford. Why couldn't? I'm just kidding. Neek Clifford, we love him. I don't know what it is with Neek, man. Anytime he's on a slate, he's just been garbage lately. When he's not on the slate, he's been great. So do like his over 16.5 points on the prop board there. His PRA is a little bit high at 30.5. Also can get his points plus assists at 20.5, but I'll just take his points straight up over 16.5 points there for Neat Clifford. So some decent ones there on underdog currently. Betting wise, there's a decent chunk here. I like Florida -4. North Carolina. Growing up, I like, you either are a Carolina fan or you were a Duke fan. It's always North Carolina for me, but this current team it's hard to really root for them. So Florida -4. Not because of that, just because Florida's better. I like DePaul +13. I'll be curious to see what Mike Randall says on the betting show about that one. But DePaul, this is not your dad's DePaul team here. Maybe it is. DePaul was good at one time, but +13 versus St. John's. I do like that. UNLV's +11 versus Dayton. I'm taking the +11 with UNLV. I don't believe Dayton's 11 points better than them. That seems a little bit outlandish there. Clemson straight up money line against South Carolina. Tennessee taking on West Carolina. That's poor West Carolina. Under 127 on the total between Seton Hall and Villanova. We had mentioned that. Drake +1 versus Kansas State. I just take Drake outright to beat Kansas State, honestly. A lot of teams on the slate tomorrow that are just playing inferior opponents. Auburn's playing Georgia State. Maryland's playing St. Francis. Ohio State's playing Valpo, although Ohio State's looked like ass lately. Let's see. Utah's playing Florida A&M. LSU's playing Stetson. We could have had some pretty good opportunities here DFS wise. Sacramento State, Oregon State has been good, but they're not 20-point favorites, better than anyone in my opinion. Sacramento State +19.5. We'll take those underdog odds there. And then Stanford versus Merrimack, the total of 138 over 138. Stanford's 15.5-point favorites, which I'm leery of them being that big of favorites, but I do think that total goes into the 145 range for what it's worth. So some decent amount of games tomorrow for us to bet on. Curious, again, to see what Mike Randall says about that DePaul game, though. DePaul +13. That's the bet of the show. We're going to hang our hat on that one. And UNLV +11. We like some of these underdogs here. Double-digit underdogs, the theme of the day. That will wrap things up for this iteration of the Super Show. I appreciate everybody who tuned in here live, or if you're watching on demand currently, please make sure, if you haven't already, that hit the like button and retweet/repost. All of those interactions help so very much. Remember, we will not be back Tuesday night. It'll be a Wednesday night version of the Super Show, which will be with myself and Jake Kuchek covering the college football slates for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And then we'll be back Friday night for the CBB version of the show. And, of course, pulling double duty this weekend once again. Only a couple weeks left of the college football season. We had some bowl games last week, and you guys already got to see the bowl game shenanigans, players getting scratched inexplicably. Lots of chaos. The transfer portal is hot and heavy right now. There has been a ton of our guys transferring out. Bo Pribula from Penn State, a big part of their offense, the backup quarterback. He's hit the portal already. How is that going to affect Penn State in their playoff game? All kinds of craziness already happening. Be ready for it. I am. Green screens, window trips. We're out here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. See you on Wednesday. College football still going on, but we're grinding this out day in, day out. Please make sure you follow me at DubDeuce85 on all social media platforms. And we'll be in the Discord grinding, tilting, and celebrating every day. Take care.